So I mean, probably everybody in this room is aware of the climate crisis and the gridlock and the government's incapacity to deal with climate change. In the film, we take a solution-oriented approach to a lot of these problems, and one of the main figures we look to for kind of a orientation for going forward is Buckminster Fuller. Do most people in this room know who Buckminster Fuller was? Okay. So, we look at both, his ideas in particular, but then also the way those ideas have been picked up by a younger generation of permaculture designers and mycologists like Paul Stamets and so on. Elizabeth, I'm curious, how the Buckminster Fuller Institute's work is progressing, and also, what type of efforts are being made to implement, that type of design philosophy on a much larger scale, and also make sure that younger people have real access to it and begin to integrate some of these ideas. Because it seems to me that, there's a small group, this group obviously is a selected group, but most people in the mainstream culture at this point don't really have much of an idea of Buckminster Fuller or what those principles mean or how they could be applied to a transformation in the world.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for having me join you all. It's a great pleasure to be here, and particularly in Chicago, representing the Buckminster Fuller Institute. Chicago played a huge role in Bucky's life. It was right at the shores of Lake Michigan, where we are right now, where he had in 1927 his sort of seminal transformation of consciousness moment, where as the story goes, penniless, with just a wife and a child, no job, he was contemplating ending his life, and he had a huge revelatory experience where he understood that his life was not his own, that he was here to try to see what one little individual could do on behalf of all humanity. And from that insight, the rest of his life was sort of propelled. There was an exhibition at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago last year in which there was a drawing that Fuller made immediately after that experience, which was a sort of mandala, and all of the ideas that he then spent the rest of his life pursuing were contained within that one drawing. Maybe some of you had the opportunity to see it. What we are trying to do at the Buckminster Fuller Institute is to inspire and celebrate and recognize those individuals who are not waiting for these massive intergovernmental agencies to solve our problems. This was something that Fuller went on and on and on about throughout his life, and I'm sure probably some of you in this room had the opportunity to hear him speak, and for hours and hours. He felt that the responsibility for the future of our planet, of making the world work for 100% of humanity, was in our hands, the individual's hands, and he demonstrated that in his own life. What we're trying to do, as I was saying, is find these people who are applying the principles of design that Fuller based his own work on, which he called comprehensive anticipatory design science, which was using nature's fundamental operating principles to apply to thinking about the problems that we are faced and about the solutions that are needed to solve these complex problems. Our major initiative is called the Buckminster Fuller Challenge. This is we are taking Bucky's challenge to us all to make the world work for 100% of humanity, and we've turned that into an annual design competition. We award a $100,000 prize each year to a solution that is taking a comprehensive whole systems approach to solving a complex problem, presenting a very compelling strategy to solve it. We have a number of different initiatives in which we are focusing attention on people who are applying this kind of design thinking to solving major problems. So,
Thank you.
we'll talk more.
Yeah. We'll have questions and answers after. Okay, and so I'm very pleased that Paul Miller, DJ Spooky, is here with us. Paul was interviewed for the film at length. We had a great talk, and we'll actually be creating a series of 2012 Time for Change Presents DVDs with the extra interviews. We'll feature his interview in there. He didn't make the final cut of the 85-minute film, yet he still was gracious enough to join us this weekend. Paul, I'm curious. I mean, Paul, I don't know how many people here know his career, but he has amazing access. He goes all around the world. He was just in the Sudan playing a concert for people under, civil war and Sharia and so on. I'm curious how you see the kind of utility of art and the responsibility of the artist at this point in time when we see ourselves moving, more and more to a kind of global convulsion kind of point.
Well, I love what was said earlier, is that this idea of environmental change has to be tied in to this idea of social justice. And I think right now, the problem in the developed versus quote-unquote developing world is people haven't really tied the issues together. They're still very separate in people's mind. They don't think of politics. Say, for example, I was just in Sudan, which is in the middle of, as you were saying, a civil war. I spent about a week and some change there. And seeing culture under Sharia law, meanwhile in the middle of a sort of a genocidal situation, and they have an indicted war criminal for President Omar Bashir. One of the most amazing things I've seen in years is that we actually got them to let us set up a sound system in the middle of downtown Khartoum. And it was pretty wild because they haven't had outdoor functions. In fact, dancing under Sharia law, there's a lot of critique of how dance and social celebration can actually happen. So if you're in Saudi Arabia, only the wealthy can have parties because they have these huge palaces, and everybody else, you can't drink alcohol, but if you go to a Saudi prince's house, you get, the good stuff. So the funny thing about Sudan, and before that, the week before that, I was in Medellin, Colombia, and I'm doing a project in Vanuatu. So all of this is connected, it's a long story. But in Vanuatu, I ended up getting about 400 acres of land, and I'm going to be setting up an artist retreat that'll focus on some of these issues. But the reason I'm talking about Sudan versus Colombia versus the South Pacific is that the kind of connecting thread here is to get people to think about getting out of their localities. And I think that's some of the worst inheritance of the 20th century. If you think about what the British Empire did by saying, for example, partitioning India and Pakistan, or Sudan and northern Egypt, or Israel and Palestine, all these kinds of territorial claims, all these kinds of ways of limiting perspective are easily played off by large corporations, which are not limited by the geography. So, as an artist, one of the things that really intrigues me right now is, I think some of the tools that have come at hand. The internet, of course, is it's such an incredible, powerful tool right now. It's about deprogramming, really, getting people to kind of get new ideological tools, different ways of building perspective, and I think art, above all, is something that is incredibly powerful for that. In Sudan, it was incredible. People, when I was DJing, they were scared to dance for a moment because there were so many security people around with AK-47s. And they weren't sure if they could dance, and then a couple people, started sort of moving a little bit, and then the rest of the crowd watched in amazement, and a group of kids broke out and just started breakdancing. And we even had women wearing burqas breakdancing, which is pretty wild. And you'd be surprised that there was this rippling movement through the crowd when people saw that you could dance. Something as simple as that. A very lyrical moment, a very interesting moment. In 51 degrees Celsius in the shade, it's really. When you're dancing, you're losing that, you can feel the moisture leaving your body, So the reason I think we have overlapping interests with the film project you're working on is I shot my own film in Antarctica. And I took a studio down to Antarctica, was there for about 4 weeks, and went to several of the main ice fields, and ended up making a symphony work about the sound of ice. So that's been touring mainly large opera houses, and I'm really interested in saying that artists, musicians, composers, we are part of this social process of deprogramming people from the worst habits of the 20th century. And if you think about the arts, say for example, look at Walt Whitman, look at Thoreau, look at Emerson. America has a lyrical tradition. You know, I mean, we really care about the environment. Even though we've been deprogrammed, we're still recovering from 8 years of Bush. And I have to admit, the Obama administration, as much as I'm a fan, I have issues with the whole oil spill thing, and I really wish they would push things a little harder. But you know what, artists, we have to put pressure on them. And I think we do have an administration that would probably respond to these pressure points, but the catalyst hasn't been, you know, I feel like revulsion and sickness when I see the images on TV of the oil. When I went down to New Orleans after Katrina, for example, and did an NPR special, and we just walked around and asked people, how do you feel? Literally, just with a microphone. How do you feel? How do you feel? How do you feel? And that being played on NPR was an incredibly emotional experience. And I find these kinds of issues, sometimes you just have to say to people, you know, something as simple as that. Look at this oil and how do you feel? You know, I know I'm an artist, so you know, I'm not here to tell everybody about policy issues. We'll leave that to my distinguished colleague here. But as an artist, I do think that it's a catalytic kind of thing. We spark, we create new forms of ideas, and people take those ideas and run with it. So Buckminster Fuller, I think, is again a very important figure for this. But at the end of the day, you know, everyone participates in this. So that's what I'm thinking about right now.
Thank you, Paul. That's awesome. So